We make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they were a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.
Hello, and welcome to Candidates Up Front. This program allows voters to get information directly from the candidates in the May 18th municipal primary election. It is a joint project of the League of Women Voters of Berks County and Berks Community Television. Both are nonpartisan organizations that never support or oppose political parties nor candidates. Today, the featured race is county coroner. The coroner's chief duty is to investigate all sudden, unexpected, unexplained, or violent deaths occurring within the county. In case of deaths which have possibly resulted from a criminal act or neglect, the coroner may conduct an inquest and call witnesses. The coroner may employ a physician to conduct autopsies. The current salary is $83,971. Coroners serve a 4-year term. Republicans will select one of 3 candidates. The candidates are John Fielding, Ronald Peters, and James Wilson. They will be asked the same questions in the same order and with the same time limit. Each candidate's views are their own and not those of the League or BCTV. Today, our candidate is John Fielding. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we'll start with the questions. Please tell our viewers in your own words what the coroner does.
The coroner shortly determines the cause and manner of death. The coroner's office, the office of coroner himself or herself, is an administrative position. They manage the office and they determine cause and manner of death based on a variety of evidentiary sources. And that is basically what the coroner does.
Why have you decided to run for coroner, and what education and background do you bring to the position?
Well, strangely enough, I have had very little complaints with the people who actually work in the office over the years. My main complaints seem to have been with the actual coroners. The deputy coroners are professional folks who do their jobs very well. But for some reason, over the years, we have elected a lot of people to coroner that either don't know how to run the office or don't know how to run the office without stealing from the taxpayers, or don't know how to run the office without firing everybody in the office for no particular reason. And this particular coroner does not work well with others. He does not manage people well, and he without getting into a lot of personalities, he seems to lack some personal discipline when it comes to his off-duty habits. Let's put it that way. So my background is I've been a lawyer for 28 years, but before that I managed in a contract security firm, and I also managed in a pest control firm. And then, as some of my friends like to say, I made a lateral career move and became a lawyer. I have managed people in 2 different venues, both of them being service venues, which is what the coroner's office is. All row officers serve the public, and it's important to have people that are service-oriented in those jobs. Furthermore, as a lawyer, I'm used to gathering evidence and bringing it together and drawing a conclusion based on evidentiary sources.
What kind of special training, if any, do you think a person should have in order to be a coroner?
Well, I think there's a variety of backgrounds that helps to be a coroner. I mean, but I really think management experience is essential. You're managing people. The deputy coroners are the ones that go out for the most part and do the investigations on the scene and bring back evidence for the coroner to consider, in addition to the police, in addition to forensic pathologists. There is no one currently in the office that is qualified to be a forensic pathologist, which means we rely on the forensic pathologists, mostly at Reading Hospital, to perform autopsies, and then they submit the evidence to the coroner, and the coroner makes a determination of cause and manner of death, depending on what the evidence shows. So I think any investigatory background for a deputy coroner would be helpful. I think administrative experience is mostly helpful for the coroner position itself.
You've a little bit anticipated our next question. What kind of special training, if any, should deputy coroners have?
I think that any kind of investigatory background is helpful. Many times, people are hired as deputy coroners that are retired police officers. Sometimes they are folks who have worked in funeral parlors. Sometimes they are EMTs. Of course, EMTs typically treat the living and not the dead, but in terms of going to a scene and being able to size up a scene and not interfere with the police and doing their job, which is an important aspect of it, I think that special training is helpful. I mean, the most important thing is to be able to work and play well with others, because there's a number of people on a scene that all have their jobs to do. And even though the coroner legally is responsible for the scene once he arrives on scene, that doesn't necessarily mean he shoves everybody aside and takes over the scene.
Do you feel it is necessary for the coroner or a deputy to go to the scene of every death to look at the body?
I believe it's necessary for a deputy to respond to the scene. Being the coroner, you always have that option. The coroner will have the same certification training as every other deputy coroner in the office. It's held out in Mechanicsburg, and quite frankly, from some of the people that have been employed by the office, I can't imagine it's too much of a stretch for someone who has 4 college degrees. But the point is that the coroner always has that option to go to a scene. I think it's important for a deputy coroner at least to go there and do whatever investigation is necessary. Sometimes the investigation is fairly short. Not everything is a homicide investigation.
If a crime is suspected in relation to a death, the police also have a responsibility at the death scene. How will you coordinate the investigation when the police and the coroner share jurisdiction?
It's called showing up and letting the police do their job. As I said, legally, the coroner is responsible for the scene when the coroner is called and arrives on the scene. But being responsible for a scene and actively interfering with the police and doing their investigation, this is not helpful. I think that coroners and police have their own jobs to do, and I think with a modicum of cooperation, I don't think that should be a problem. Sometimes people allow their human nature and pride to interfere with their ability to do that, but you just have to put that on the back burner and try to think of the teamwork involved in trying to get to the bottom of whatever the cause and manner of death is.
How does the coroner's role differ from police work?
Well, obviously, the coroner is focused on cause and manner of death, and the police are concerned with determining how the death was caused, and their evidence and their investigation becomes part of the coroner's determination. Part of the problem with these questions is there's a difference between the deputy coroner's job on the scene and the coroner's job back in the office, where the deputy coroner cooperates with the police to do the investigation, and then the evidence is brought back to the coroner to make the decision. So the coroner's role is really more administrative. That doesn't mean he can't go out to a scene, but that's not primarily what his role is.
Do you view the coroner's office as a law enforcement agency?
It certainly is a law enforcement agency. It's expected to cooperate with not only the police, but also the district attorney's office. When an inquest is called, the coroner acts as a judge with the advice of his solicitor, and the evidence is generally presented by the district attorney's office to determine cause and manner of death in an inquest. So, yes, it is law enforcement. In fact, a little-known matter is that when the sheriff is sued, the coroner is the one that has to serve him in a civil action, because the sheriff normally serves all civil actions in the county. But who serves the sheriff when the sheriff is sued? The coroner, oddly enough.
When is an autopsy necessary? I note for our viewers that an autopsy is a medical examination of the body by the pathologist.
Well, I think an autopsy is necessary when the police have made a preliminary interpretation of the evidence to conclude that the death was a homicide, because they're doing an investigation as to not only cause and manner of death, but also potential people involved. And the evidence of the body is generally very strong evidence as to how death occurred and to who may have caused that death. And the forensic pathologists have a particular role in gathering evidence from the body that may lead to the perpetrator of the crime if it's determined to be a homicide. And therefore, I think an autopsy is necessary, definitely necessary under that set of circumstances.
Some pathologists, called forensic pathologists, have extra training in cases of sudden, unexpected, and violent deaths. When would you request the services of a forensic pathologist to do the autopsy?
Well, I hate to be obvious about this, but in cases of sudden, unexpected, and violent deaths. Being a lawyer, I also learned how to read along the way. But, having said all of that, obviously, if a homicide, and homicide is an unexpected or violent death, sometimes there's an issue of whether a person committed suicide or whether it is a homicide, and there is evidence of the body that would indicate as to which it could be. And in that kind of case, a forensic pathologist would be the best person to determine what evidence the body can yield up as to what the cause and manner of death is.
The coroner has the authority to call an inquest. In other words, the coroner can subpoena people to present evidence in a death case. Why and when would you call an inquest?
When the police have concluded an investigation and the cause and manner of death is uncertain, and you have to make a decision one way or the other, or you leave it an open case, you would call an inquest for the district attorney's office to present the evidence before the coroner acting as judge to determine at least their side of why they would consider the cause and manner of death to be a homicide or whether it would be an accidental death. And it would be up to the coroner to examine all the evidence brought before him. In other words, it's basically a court proceeding to do what the coroner does most of the time anyway. It's just in these particular cases, the cause and manner of death are so uncertain that they're asking for a legal determination as to how the death occurred.
Sometimes a crime takes place in a neighboring county, but the victim is taken to a hospital in Berks and dies here. Because the death occurred here, the Berks coroner must investigate. How will you work with the other county to manage the investigation?
Well, what I would do is I would coordinate with the police department where the cause is alleged to have occurred. As I can see, the victim, for example, the victim is stabbed in Pottstown, but he's brought to Reading because for some reason they can't go to Pottstown Memorial. I wouldn't know what that reason would be, but they, for some reason, find themselves at Reading Hospital. We would, of course, want to coordinate with the police, the Pottstown police. We would want to coordinate with the coroner's office in Montgomery County and any other investigatory bodies and law enforcement bodies there, because after all, just because a person dies in our hospital doesn't mean the crime took place in our hospital, and therefore you would have to coordinate with those other law enforcement entities so that they can perhaps locate the person who did this and prosecute them in accordance with the law in their county.
What qualifications would you look for when hiring a deputy coroner?
I'd look for an investigatory background or a background as an EMT or something like that. You know, I've had this discussion with my opposite numbers. You know, I try to follow the 11th commandment of Ronald Reagan and not criticize other Republicans, and we've had this discussion. But when I've talked to the other guys running for this position, it just seems like they're running for deputy coroner instead of coroner. Because they're touting their investigatory background, or in one case, their EMT background, which is all very fine and good, but that doesn't, being good at investigations doesn't help you administer an office, doesn't help you manage an office, it doesn't help you deal with people. And it doesn't necessarily even help you make decisions with respect to evidence, which is something I spent 28 years doing. So I would look for some kind of investigatory background for that job, deputy coroner, not necessarily for the job of coroner.
Tell us how you would organize your staff.
Well, one of the things I think I would like to do is when hiring a new person, I think I would like to appoint some members of the staff to sit in on the interviews. One of the problems we've had with the coroner's office, in my humble opinion, is that it's over the years, it's sort of the last redoubt of patronage hiring, where everybody likes to hire their friends or their drinking buddies or somebody like that. And in order to avoid that kind of appearance of impropriety, I think one of the things I would like to do is set up a hiring committee to advise me on different candidates for office of deputy coroner. The one thing that does is it ensures that we have qualified people. The second thing it does, it protects me against the claim that I am engaging in the theory of relativity, as it were, or hiring my friends or something like that. So that's one way I think I would organize the office in a way that doesn't seem to be the case now.
Is the current staff the right size, too large, or too small?
Well, I think the current staff is fine in terms of size, but size may not be the problem. I think the mixture of staff may be more of a problem because I think a charge that is fairly laid at the feet of the acting coroner is that he hires his friends rather than people that are necessarily qualified to be deputy coroners, and he doesn't manage the professional staff well, and he manages them to the derogation of the people that he hires as his friends. So I don't think it's a matter of size. I think it's a matter of mix, and I would expect to examine that if I were elected.
The coroner must deal with families at a very bleak moment. They've just lost a loved one. What is the appropriate role of the coroner and deputies in dealing with families? How will you train your staff to provide what you feel is needed?
Well, I think that it would be useful to have seminars in death and in how to deal with people that have suffered a death. I would cite Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on that subject, which I've read, because, quite frankly, my first two degrees are in religious education from Washington Bible College and Master of Divinity from Reformed Episcopal Seminary. So I'm not unfamiliar with the nature of counseling under that set of circumstances, without wanting to necessarily bring my religious predilections into it. I would ask for psychological help and for seminars for my staff and how to deal with people through the grieving process. Because after all, the vast majority of deaths in Berks County are not homicides. Thank goodness. We haven't gotten to that point yet, unfortunately.
What measures would you take for quality control?
I would appoint adequate supervision. One of the other problems is the office is funny. It's a union office, but because of certain court determinations, the people in charge of the office don't necessarily have to go by the union contracts. And there are people that are union members, and of course there are people that are management. And whoever you bring in as management ends up supervising the staff for the most part. And I think that the most important things is to hire the right people that have done management before and can handle folks.
Do you recommend changes to improve the efficiency and function of the coroner?
Well, as I said before, I think part of the issue would be evaluating the current staff to see, frankly, why they're there. Because I've known some of the staff for a number of years. I mean, I ran for coroner in 2005 when I defeated the incumbent in a primary, and the reason I did that was because one of the fired deputy coroners ended up as my secretary in the public defender's office, and I was appalled by what I heard, and I said, well, we can't have this. So I've always been kind of one to take action when I think action needs to be done, and I think a thorough evaluation of why everybody's there and what they contribute to the teamwork of the office is going to be an important aspect of taking over the office.
Are there new technologies you'd like to implement?
I would have to wait to take over the office in order to evaluate what technologies are out on the market and that sort of thing. I mean, I've heard some things about virtual autopsies. I would like to see how that works because I'm sorry, I'm an old-fashioned guy. I'm not sure I know any other way than looking at an actual body. I'm not sure how you look at a virtual body, so.
What three things do you want to accomplish if you are elected?
I want to, I want to institute a new hiring practice to protect myself and also protect the office. I want to thoroughly evaluate the qualifications of the people that are currently there. And I want to make certain that everyone there has the proper atmosphere and the resources to do their job. I mean, we can go to work and we can have a job, or we can have a life calling. And I will tell you that in the case of my old secretary from the public defender's office, it was a blow to her to be fired from that job because for some reason, and I'm not sure that I would have thought of being a deputy coroner as being a lifetime position, but she was very offended, and she looked nothing more than forward to going to her job every day and doing that job. And I think it's important that people like that be rewarded with the atmosphere that allows them to accomplish their job and the resources that allows them to accomplish their job, and fostering the teamwork that helps everybody get along and do what needs to be done for the office.
Please make your closing statement.
Yes, well, my name once again is John Fielding, and I'm running for coroner. This will be the second time that I ran for coroner. I originally ran and lost in 2005 to Mr. Hess, who resigned just over 2 years, evidently to allow the acting coroner to claim incumbency. I believe that I am more suited to this job than anybody else running. I have the administrative experience in my background to run the office, and I have the experience to gather evidence from a variety of sources, make a decision based on the evidence, and be able to manage the office in an efficient and effective way. It's important to have teamwork when you are trying to accomplish a goal, and it's important to foster an atmosphere that allows you to have teamwork and to accomplish the goal. And that is my pledge to the electorate of Berks County, that we will have no more patronage in that office, and that we will run the office in a professional manner, as the deputy coroners that have been there for years have come to expect over the years. And that is what I expect to reward them for, the proper atmosphere and the resources necessary for them to do their jobs that they've committed themselves to all of this time.
Thank you, John Fielding, for talking with us about your qualifications and philosophy to be a coroner. Viewers, please remember, the municipal primary election is May 18th. Polls are open from 7 in the morning to 8 at night. You may vote at your polling place or by mail-in ballot. A primary election is when members of the Democratic and Republican parties select their candidates. Party members will vote for statewide and local judges, county coroner, pathonetary, and treasurer, school directors, and city, township, and borough officers. But all voters, not just those in the main parties, are encouraged to vote on amendments to our Pennsylvania Constitution, which will also be on the ballot. To check your registration status or to request a mail-in ballot, go to votespa.com. That's VOTESPA.com. For more information on other races on your ballot, go to vote411.org. That's VOTE411.org. Or, if you prefer to talk to a live person in English or in Spanish, phone Berks County Election Services at 610-478-6490. That's 610-478-6490. And please continue to watch BCTV for more candidate interviews and information about the constitutional amendments that will be on your ballot. And for the League of Women Voters, I'm going a little slower. I'm Bill Litfin. Good day.
We make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they're a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.